Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name is Rory Paquette. I am so grateful to be your host today. Thank you so much for being here, folks. I need to give you a shout out, a huge shout out. When we went to 5 days a week, you folks jumped in, you supported us like crazy, and it has not stopped. You are sharing it, you are liking it, you are commenting. We've had hundreds of DMs. I think I've gotten back to everybody. I'm going to get back to everybody, I promise, one way or another. If you haven't heard from me yet, feel free to send it again, and I'll go ahead and make sure that I get a response back to you because I respond to every single one of them personally. And you folks have been blowing us up lately. Now, I think that one of the reasons you've been doing that is because we've had so many powerful men on here as guests talking about some incredibly powerful subjects. And today is no different. You're going to absolutely love this guest we have today. I've only known him for a few minutes. I already love this interaction we have going. He's fascinating, and I think you're going to find that to be the case too. Before we do all that, of course, if you're a friend of the program, you know what we're doing. We're going to pay some bills for a second. So let me take a quick sip of my preferred beverage out of the famous IU cup. That's right. I got the right cup today because some of you guys got really upset when I used a different cup a few days ago. Here we go. Oh, man, that is good stuff. Made it fresh this morning. There it is. Fantastic. You know what we're drinking? It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Go check them out, you guys. Deep, dark, rich, bold, beautiful, just like my wife. They brew a mean cup of Joe. It's a mean bean that they put together to do all the right things for all the right reasons. They support veterans, which is one of the biggest reasons why we work with and support them. You guys all know how important veterans are here at the Power Man Podcast. So, folks, if you want to support veterans, if you want to get a great cup of coffee, head on over to Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Tell them Power of Man sent you. Let me get another sip of this so I can keep up with this guy across the table from me who's firing up his own beverage over there. So I'm going to have to drink a lot of this probably through this program. Oh, there we go. All right, I think we're ready. So let me go ahead and introduce the guest I have today. This gentleman has done so much. I'm not sure we're even going to get to it all today, but we're going to try. I may have to have him back on. I don't know. We'll see. But please welcome to the podcast, missionary, adventurer, and Bible advocate, among a million other things. Father, husband, George Cisneros. George, how you doing, sir?
Good morning, Rory. I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm jealous of your coffee. I'm having some tea, but I am as soon as we get off, I'm going to look up Freedom Hill Coffee. Looks great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It really is good coffee. I drink it all the time. So it's and I can drink anything I want on this show because it's Power Man, but I choose to drink Freedom Hill coffee. All right, that's for my sponsor. I hope you guys like that one. Okay, good. All right, but George, listen, you have a fantastic story, and you and I talked about it a little bit in the pre-interview. But to start with, just give folks an idea of who is George Cisneros. What are you about, and what brings you here today?
Wow. Well, I'm 58 years old. I have been married for 26 years. We have 9 kids, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but 5 of them are adopted. We are Christian missionaries here in Guatemala. We're originally from Colorado, and we moved here 12 and a half years ago. Actually, this July, we're coming up on 13 years that we've been in Guatemala. And yeah, we met these little ones about 5 years ago. They were stuck in a Guatemalan orphanage. I say stuck because at the time there were four, and those four are siblings. And one of the Guatemalan laws, which is great, is to keep five siblings. If you have a sibling group, you can't separate them to adopt them to people, which
Oh, wow.
is a really good law. But we adopted four. No one would adopt four. No one is going to adopt four. So first of all, just adoptions in Guatemala. Guatemalans don't generally adopt. There are, I don't know, 11 million people. I don't honestly, maybe 17 million. I can't remember. Millions of people in Guatemala, and there were just maybe a few hundred adoptions last year. So adoptions are not very popular, and especially nobody's going to adopt 4 kids. As it turns out, we adopted 4. They would have grown up in an orphanage. We adopted the 4, and then a couple years later, we found out they had a sibling, a younger sibling that was in an orphanage, and so they asked us, bravely asked us if we would adopt a 5th, and we immediately said yes, we would, and so we went through that process again. So it's
Wow.
a little bit about my life. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's a great place to start. Holy cow. No, you had nine kids altogether. Four were yours. Now, I think what you mentioned to me earlier was that at the very least you paced it a little bit and you waited for yours to leave home and then you kind of reloaded. Is that what happened? Did I get that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have two older daughters and then two sons. Our youngest biological son is, I think he's 21 right now. And he was just married a month and a half, 2 months ago. And then our next oldest son is 24. He was married about 6 months ago.
That's
They
great.
both live in Minnesota. And then my two daughters both married, and one lives in Colorado, one lives in North Carolina. And as our youngest son was leaving the house, we adopted our fifth. And so, yeah, we it's been an amazing experience in that I feel like it's really just kept my wife and I young. I mean, I'm 58 years old, and our youngest, she is 4 years old.
Wow.
And so, I mean, we literally started over. When she came to us, she was two. She is the joy of our life. All five of them are just, I mean, listen, there are hard days for sure. Um, but there are going to be hard days with any kids. And we're just really blessed we just feel so blessed to be able to raise these little ones. So
That's awesome. There's a bunch that I want to get to with all of this, but I do want to back up for just a minute and say first, congratulations on, being married for, that long. I'd say 26 years. Is that right?
26 years, 27 coming up in June. Yeah,
I mean,
man.
that just does not happen that often. My wife and I celebrated our 25th, and people were like, "Whoa, you're kidding me!" Nobody makes it that far anymore. So that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then you've got two boys that are very similar in ages to my boys. I have a daughter that's 32. I've got two sons that are 24 and 21. My
Wow.
21-year-old just got married in December. My 24
Wow.
year old's getting married in October.
Wow.
My daughter's getting married the same October. So if I disappear from podcasting for about 30 days in October of this coming year,
Yeah.
you all know where I went. But I'll be, trying to recover from two weddings in a row. But it's amazing to me, and it's great to hear someone else have this exact situation. It seems like maybe it's new, maybe it's only new to me, but I think it's just wonderful that Christian-driven young men are embracing marriage the way that they seem to be. And I've heard this from other people, and now I hear it from you. Have you found that that's the case?
Wow. Here's the thing. My two boys did it very differently than I did. I grew up in a different era. I'm 58, and so
Right.
we dated for ourselves. We dated to see if we can get to second base and then third base. Like that was just the goal. In high school and then of course in college. So my two sons did it completely differently. They both did not date until they were ready to be married. And so then it was really not dating, it was more courting. And I
Wow.
know that these are weird words, but both my sons were virgins before they got married. Which is honestly just amazing in today's day and age. And as a matter of fact, my both my sons had not kissed their wives until the wedding day,
Wow.
which is just countercultural. But both of them are deeply and madly in love with the Lord, and I think that's really it. That's the whole thing. And so, that's one of the things that we do here in Guatemala. We came to Guatemala 12 and a half years ago, not exactly sure what the Lord had for us, but we established a private Christian middle school for boys. And eventually, the Lord revealed to us why boys. We really didn't know, other than we really felt like that's what we were supposed to do. But eventually, down the road, we realized it was to raise boys to be men of God, and it's something that's desperately needed in Guatemala, and quite honestly, I think it's probably needed in the United States as well.
Yeah, I think it's needed like everywhere. I would agree with you completely. There's just nowhere near enough of that. Now, we're going to back up just a little bit again. As of everybody's hearing you talk about living in Guatemala. Now, you're not from Guatemala. You have a story about how you ended up going to Guatemala or decided to go to Guatemala, I guess. How do you, according to what I've read, you had the American dream life, and you literally, you and your wife and your kids, you packed up and said, "We're done. We're leaving. We're going to Guatemala to, feed the underprivileged and this whole thing." How does that? What happened, and how does that happen?
Wow, that is such a good question, and not a super easy answer, but I'll give you the quickest answer I can. Grew up Catholic, and in college, started going to a non-denominational church. I have had God in the background of my life for as far back as I can remember. And I say I had God in the background of my life because honestly, I really didn't know God. I really didn't understand other than, I grew up in a family, like I said, that was going to church every week and um, teaching us the right things. I believe it was around 2010 or 2011. I was in the basement of our home. We did have the dream life. We owned a couple of small businesses that were doing well. I we had a beautiful dream home. Our kids were going to good schools. It was just the perfect life. But I remember being at home in our basement watching the Denver Broncos, my team of the day. I remember they had lost a game, and I just turned the TV off, and I'm just kind of sitting in the basement alone. And I really felt like the Spirit of God asking me, "Do you love me?" And I'm immediately in my head. I'm like, "Of course I love you. Like I go to church. I just went to church today, this morning. Like, of course I love you." And but then I felt the Lord asking me, "Do you love me more than you love your wife?" And I thought about it, and man, I at that time I was deeply and madly in love with my wife, and I wake up next to her. We have coffee every morning. We spend time together. I get to see her every day and hug her every day physically, and I was honest with God, and I said, God, I think I love my wife more than I love you. Like I'll do anything for my wife. And then I felt God asking me, "Do you love me more than you love your kids?" And I immediately, like, it was so much quicker. I'm like, "Man, I would die for my kids. You're a father.
Yep.
If your kids, one of your kids calls up and says, 'Hey, Dad, I am dying. I'm going to die. I need a heart transplant.' And there's no one in the world that's going to match, and he would never ask, and you would just say, 'I'll give you my heart. I will give you my heart.' I would die for my kids. And so I said, no, I love my kids more than I love you. And that's a really hard conversation to have with God, by the way. But then I had this feeling that he was asking me, "Do you love me more than you love the Denver Broncos?" And it's kind of a funny question, right? Um, but then I thought about it, man, and I really challenge other men to think this way. But I thought, I just spent 3 hours watching the Denver Broncos, and I did it joyfully, even though they lost, and I do it every single Sunday. Yet, in my entire life to that point, probably 45 years old, my entire life, I'd never spent 3 hours in a row joyfully reading the Bible, not once. I had never spent 3 hours in my life joyfully praying to the Lord ever in my whole life. And so, this kind of knee-jerk reaction of course I love you more than wait a minute, and I started thinking about it. And it was a really big revelation. And really what it made me do, Rory, is it made me question, do I even love God? Like, do I love God? Because here's the thing, I teach my boys here at the academy at least weekly, if not, 3, 4 times a week. It's easy to say you love God. It's easy to say you're a Christian. It's easy to say that you love Jesus. And I tell them, watch, I love Jesus. I love God. They're just words, right? But to get it, the distance from your head to your heart and to have a relationship and to trust in a savior, that's everything. And that's that 12 inches from your head to your heart. it can be longer distance than anywhere you've ever traveled in your life because at that moment I realized that it was more in my head and maybe tradition of my family and my parents and the things that I had done that I was saying I was a Christian and I believed. And so uh, that night I talked to my wife about this revelation that I had and this conversation that I had. And that night I made a decision that I would stop praying. Like I wanted to see what was going on here. And I stopped praying for myself and for my businesses and for health. And anytime I felt like praying for those things, I had another prayer. And I prayed this one prayer for an entire year. I prayed, God, I love you. That was my prayer. For an entire year, all I did was I was like, God, I love you. And if it wasn't God, I love you, God, I want to love you. And it was a year, almost to the day, it was a year later that my church was going on a short-term mission trip, just a week to Guatemala. And I signed up to go on this trip. It was just me. Went on the trip, spent a week in Guatemala. Nothing crazy happened, except near the end of that trip, we were at a feeding center, and at this feeding center, it was all kids, mostly kids, like 90% kids, a few adults, and they were kind of crammed into this cafeteria at the church, and they were getting ready to have lunch. And it was probably the only meal that a lot of those kids were going to have that day. But I remember that the worship team got up and they started playing a song, and every kid, it was like this wave. Every kid just stood up and they started just belting out from their hearts. They're just like singing these praise and worship songs before the meal, but they weren't doing it for the meal. They were doing it because they loved God. I was the back of the cafeteria and I'm watching all this go down, and these kids are like raising their hands up to the Lord, and they had nothing. They had nothing in their lives. They were the poor of the poor. And this is in Zone 6 of Guatemala City. And I was standing in the back and I'm looking at them and I'm watching this all go down. And I thought to myself, man, they love the Lord. Like they love the Lord. And it was, I don't know why, but at that moment I thought, wow, wait a minute. Like a year later, right? I've been praying, I love you, Lord. At that moment, I started crying. I realized I love the Lord. For the first time in my life, 46 years old, I love the Lord. It was just an amazing experience. But I also felt the Lord. And listen, this does not happen to me where I feel this like conversation with the Holy Spirit, but I really felt the Lord saying, follow me. I want you. I don't want you on Sundays, man. I want you. I want your life. And so that day I made a decision. I'm like, okay, I'm going to serve you. You lead me. I will serve you with my life. I got back home a couple days later. I remember it perfectly. You know, those things that happen that are just so huge in your life that you remember the details. And I remember walking up to the steps of our home. It had just snowed. It was like 11 o'clock at night. It was in November. It was December. I had left in November, but I came back on like December 2nd. It had just snowed. I remember the crunch under my shoes as I'm walking up the steps to our front door. I go inside. My kids are in bed. My wife's up waiting for me, and we're laying in bed that night. And I remember it's dark. I'm holding her hand, like we're laying side by side. I'm holding her hand. I'm telling her about everything that had been going on, and then I told her that we, I have given my life to the Lord, which is really, I've given our lives to the Lord. What are your thoughts about this? Like, what do you think, babe? And she said, she had one word, man. Like, my heart was like, what if she's like, the Lord has to do this. I can't make her say yes. And she said one word, and she said, okay. And that was it. And I'm emotional talking about this because it was maybe the most emotional time of my life. But she said, okay. This was December 2nd. We decided to put our house on the market after Christmas. So on like January 2nd, we put our house. A month later, our house goes on the market. We sell both of our small businesses. And 7 months later, from the day I got back, we are boarding a plane to move to Guatemala. House sold, two businesses sold, all of our kids' toys, everything we owned is sold, and we're on a plane going to Guatemala. So that's the story.
I'm very rarely speechless, but I'm just like this. This is not a movie. This really happened. I mean, you.
Really,
This is
really happened.
almost
Yeah.
like Mosquito Coast or something. Is what I'm like listening to right now. I'm going, wait, really? I have to ask, how did the kids handle that? I mean, abrupt, like goodbye to everything you know. My goodness.
They were young. They were like 9, 10, and 11. I actually our youngest was 8, but he turned 9 the day after we got to Guatemala. So 9, 10, and 11. We sat down with them, and the very next day I sat down with them. I'm sharing pictures with them, and I'm telling them all about Guatemala and letting them know that there are people there that don't have homes to live in. There are people there that are hungry. I told them about these kids in this feeding center. And I asked them, what do you guys think about, like, what if we moved to Guatemala to help these people there? And they didn't really, it's funny because I was showing them photos of some of the homes in Guatemala. So they thought we were going to move to Guatemala and like live in like a, cornstalk home and things like that. And so they were a little bit intimidated. And so when we talked to them, well, listen, mom and I believe this is where God is calling us. This is what we want to do. But if you guys don't, what we want from you guys is to give it a year. We're going to commit. We're going to go for a year. But if at the end of the year, and we told them, we're going to sell everything that you own, but we bought each of them an iPad mini, and we said, so that they have something with them, because we couldn't take all their stuff. So we bought each of them an iPad mini, and we said, listen, at the end of the year, if you guys want to come back, and we meant it, if you want to come back, we will give you $500 to rebuy all your toys. So each of you have $500, rebuy all your stuff, and we will come back. So at the end of the year, we sat down with them and we had a meeting, and we said, okay, does anybody want to go back? And so again, here they are, 10, 11, and 12 years old. And my middle kid, our oldest daughter was in college, but my middle kid was like, he's joking around. He's like, "Yeah, I want to go back. Where's my $500?" And I knew he was joking, but I'm like, "Okay, if you want to go back, that's a decision for everybody, and so we'll give you your five." And he's like, "I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding." Um, so it was a very, very hard transition. I'm not going to lie. The hardest transition was really for our kids, and it was because they went to we got there, and for the first year they went to a missionary kids school, which is taught in English. It was a really good landing place for us. And they had Spanish class every day to learn the language, obviously, but it was kind of like American Spanish class, even though it was taught by Guatemalans. You know how you go to in high school, you learn Spanish, but you really don't.
Sure.
At the end of
Right.
it, you can, you can order at Taco Bell, and that's pretty much it. And so it was similar. It was similar in Guatemala. So we went to this missionary kids school. At the end of the year, they didn't know any more Spanish than when they started, and we weren't comfortable with that. So we moved closer to where our ministry was, which was another city, and we enrolled them into a private Guatemalan school that was obviously all Spanish, and it was it, that year was brutal. Really, the first semester was just brutal. They got picked on. They're American. They didn't know Spanish. But by the end of the first semester, all three were completely fluent in Spanish. To this day, completely fluent. Our youngest son and our daughter went for 1 year, and then my middle son went for 2 years. He had made some good friends. He wanted to keep going. The other two came home, and my wife homeschooled them. So the transition for my kids was really hard. But every one of them is incredibly grateful that we did that. They're all, like I said, back in the United States, but it was a good experience. I believe that if we came to Guatemala just so that our sons would know Jesus Christ, know the Lord, and have a relationship with Him, it would have been worth it. Like, if that's the reason we came, that would have been worth it. If we would have come to Guatemala just to adopt these five, that would have been worth it. So there's been just incredible. I mean, and that doesn't even include, all the other things that we have done and continue to do. But those two things were a really big deal. Um, my youngest son, who just got married, he and his wife want to be missionaries, but they want to be missionaries in an unreached country, maybe Afghanistan, something like that. And then my oldest son is currently, they both went to Bible school. My oldest son is now on internship with his church, and he and his wife, he plans to be a pastor in a foreign country. He wants to plant a church. So to have that, and again, that is not all that's happened in the last 12 and a half years, but just those two things would be worth us coming to this country.
Sure. Well, I
Except
mean,
there's a
wow.
hundred other things.
Sure. What a story. Clearly you were called to make this change, make this move. Um, Clearly the kids were involved as part of it because they didn't lose their minds and say, no, I'm not giving up my toys and everything else. I mean, the fact that they were even willing to go there for a year says a ton about their belief structure, about how you raised them up until that point. So congratulations on that too. It's very impressive, for kids of that age to have enough of a worldly view to say, yes, I'll go do this for a year. Dad, I know a ton of guys who, if they tried to have that conversation with their kids, it would be on the floor, screaming, throwing stuff, needing therapy. And you
Yeah.
guys, were able to do this. Um, as I've been listening to your story and as I even, read about it before I even met you, it was very pronounced in my mind that there's no way to do this without having a very supportive spouse. And I know that your wife said, okay, to go. Um, but in talking to you before our interview, you mentioned that, things weren't always sunshine and rainbows for you and your wife. Um, what kind of difficulties did, what happened, this move, I mean, any of this stuff, what did you guys have to deal with in your marriage prior to this and then through this?
Well, let me tell you that if anybody's thinking about, becoming a missionary or doing something overseas like this, you have to have two things in order, three things really. First of all, you have to have your faith in order. In my opinion, you have to have a strong relationship with the Lord. You can't come here to find God. That's number one. Number two is your finances have to be in order. You cannot come with any kind of debt at all, in my opinion. You have to come debt free and with good financial foundation. Number two. Number three is you have to come with a solid relationship with your wife. You cannot come to a foreign country hoping to fix any of those things. This is just my opinion, but I would
Sure.
never recommend anybody to become a missionary without those three things solidly in place. My wife and I were madly in love when we got married. But the thing is, here's the thing about marriage, because I've seen, my two boys within the last 6 months have both gotten married. That you are marrying a stranger. So you can be in love, but the reality is you don't know who they are. I don't care how long you have been dating them. You could be dating them for years, but you are a stranger. Everything changes when you're living under the same roof, you're sleeping in the same bed, you're eating together, and you're sharing finances and you're sharing all the struggles of the world. When we got married in love, but the reality is we were strangers, and our first year was absolutely a nightmare. It was just really, really hard. And I don't think it's that way for everybody. It hasn't been that way for my sons, as far as I can tell. But it was very hard. Why? Number one is I was extremely immature, and I was also very selfish. I think probably, to be honest, I think that selfishness is probably one of the greatest reasons for divorce, because it's selfishness. It could
Hmm.
be in finances, it could be selfishness in doing your own thing. There's selfishness in the things that you do, and so I was selfish and I was immature. For her, I think she would admit, and we've talked about it, but is that she was immature. She was young, and so we had quite a transition. she was the baby of the family and I'm the oldest of the family. Where there was just we did not know each other like at the end of the day. So the first year was bad, and then the next 6 years after that were also bad. They weren't as bad as the first year, but they were pretty bad to the point that in year seven, I in my head was I had already resolved in my head that I am going to live with her. I'm going to provide for the family, but I'm just going to live my own life, um, which is crazy. She had, in year seven, she was thinking the same thing, man. And so, literally, we had two people who were just kind of waiting, I guess, for our kids to grow up. I don't know what our end game was. Um, but that was what was going on in our life. And so how do you get so from there? Now, I will say there was a transition, and the transition was that she kind of started it. She started, just how can I love you? What can I do for you? And she started just supporting me. And then I kind of started doing the same thing, and our walls started to come down. And we are that was, if we've been married 27 years now, so that was 20 years ago. And I know this just sounds like some sort of movie, but in year eight it was better. For the first time in 7 years it was better, and then year nine was better than eight, and it's been that way through our last, for these last 27 years. Every year, is as hard as it is to believe, every year has been better, but it's been intentional. I have had to take my eyes off myself and put myself, you would think, put my eyes on her, but really what the greatest difference has been taking my eyes off myself and putting my eyes onto the Lord.
Hmm.
And man, if I could give any advice to men who are struggling, I would really take a look, like, just be brutally honest with yourself and ask yourself, where is your focus? Because if your focus is on your life and, uh, all about you, or honestly, if it's on your wife, um, I think that your focus is misplaced. That's my opinion. I think that everything changed. The more I put the Lord into focus, the better my life gets. That does not mean as a Christian that I have an easy life. We still have struggles, of course, but I'm not in charge of, you know, uh, taking those struggles on alone. I am filled with the Holy Spirit, as the Bible says. When we believe, we're filled with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is a comforter, He's a guide, He's a consoler. And there's so many incredible things. I mean, He does the work of sanctification in our life, which is amazing. Like, that one fact alone should blow people away. Sanctification is making us more into the image of Jesus Christ. And of course we're never going to be like him, but when the Holy Spirit is in our life, we're becoming more like him. That's just, man, if you're not a believer, that one fact alone should make you take a look at the Bible with new eyes.
Wow. Um, you really have a way of wrapping things up. I gotta be honest with you. So, my goodness, you said a lot just now, in so many different ways. Um, Obviously, you guys were in a much better place before you decided to move to Guatemala. I mean,
100%.
this was okay. So you
Yeah.
turn your focus to Jesus. And you are now. Did you start? Here's the question I'm looking for in the middle of being totally lost in your story. And I apologize. I'm a fan right now, just listening to your story. I forgot I have to host
So
this thing.
kind.
So um, as I'm sitting here and I'm listening, to everything, and I'm just enthralled by what you're saying. Uh, I Somebody has to go first. When there's a problem, the problem just keeps capitulating back and forth. Well, I do this, and well, then she reacts and she does this, and then I
Mm-hmm.
react and I do
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, in any case, what I'm always telling the men that are in our groups is that somebody has to go first, somebody has to lead. So,
Mm-hmm.
did you take on that role of I'm going to put Christ in the middle of this? I'm going to put all my focus here, and then did your wife follow and move forward? Is that kind of how that worked? Did you guys do it
Yeah.
together as a team and discuss it? How did it go?
Interestingly, my wife was the spiritual leader in our marriage for a long time, meaning that even teaching our young ones, when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, she was the one that was teaching them Bible. I was just, you know, I was unengaged. I think, man, I keep coming back to this word, but I was just really selfish. I really want to challenge men that if you're struggling in your marriage, I really want you to just be honest with yourself and sit down, journal it out, and look at the ways that you're loving your wife, and look at the ways that you're loving yourself. Because once I took my eyes off myself and was able to not be selfish anymore, I was then able to love my wife in the way that she deserved. And number one, the way that she deserves to be loved. But more than that, the way that the Lord commands us to love our wives. He asks us to love our wives in the same way that he loves the church. And that's a pretty high standard that we're not ever going to reach, but we can try. So, I began because I was focused on the Lord. I was now able to be a better man. Now I was able to be a better husband. So I literally, man, and I continue to do this. I wake up with this thought: how can I love my wife better today? Like, it's, for me, this is weird because men are competitive, right? But in my head, I'm like, I am not going to let her outlove me today. And so what that means to me is like, I'm going to get up and it's like, man, I'm not going to ask her. I'm in my head. I'm like, what can I do for her today? So maybe it's just, washing the dishes. Maybe it's just sitting down with her and spending time, spending some time with her directly, because that's important to her. She is, her love language is gifts. And so maybe it's just buying some chocolate. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but I wake up daily. So first of all, I think as men, I think we owe it to our families to get up early. This is just my opinion. I'm obviously, um, I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning. I spend time in the Word. I spend time planning my day. I spend time in prayer, and you pray over your wife and you pray over your family, and then I'm off to the races. But I think our families deserve that. And let me tell you, it's the best time of day. If the house is quiet, that habit started because we have 5 little ones, and our house is crazy. 7:30, 7 o'clock, it's absolutely bananas. And so that was my time to get away for myself, but it's turned into this just incredible time, refocusing and putting, getting good direction, and looking at ways how I can lead my family. Let me tell you, as men, I don't care what society tells you. We haven't been in the States for a while, but everything I'm seeing online is kind of crazy to me as a 58-year-old. I am telling you, for the men that are listening to this podcast, that it is our responsibility to step up and lead our families, and we have to take charge. That does not mean we rule our families. What that means is we're the example. So I'm leading my family when I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm leading my family when I pray over my wife. I'm leading my family when I am reading to my daughter, before bedtime. Those are the ways that we need to lead our families. This is not about, I'm the boss and I'm the guy and you got to listen to me. To be honest with you, Jesus Christ he came to serve, and that's the heart that we need to have.
Love all of that. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much for putting that into such great words. And that's what we talk about all the time. You've got to have a servant's
Mm,
heart. It is not about, hey, I'm in charge. It's not,
absolutely.
about ruling. It's someone has to go first. Someone has to lead by example. Somebody has to be the first person, through the barrier. And that's what, the man's job is. So I love hearing that from you. Your story is amazing, and you can tell that you've had this support. So you and your wife, you put Jesus at the center of your relationship. Your focus is there. You get closer. You decide to make this move, and then it really sounds like you were very strong when you made the move. Is
Yes.
that fair to say? Okay. Um,
You're talking about like in our marriage?
yeah, it sounds like your marriage was very solid when you decided
Very.
to make this gigantic move to Guatemala, you know?
Couldn't have done it if it wasn't. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Now, was there any adjustment for your wife or for you folks, as a married couple moving over to Guatemala? It's a whole new society, basically.
Well, listen, if your marriage is not strong, and we've seen it over and over and over again, we see a lot of people come to the United States as missionaries or come to Guatemala as missionaries who don't have solid finances or they don't have a solid marriage. And without it, like almost always, they're back in the United States. They go back home within a year or two for sure. Very, very few last more than 2 years. This is not the type of thing that you want to do. This is not the path you want to take if you want to fix a marriage. I don't know if people think, well, if we go and we focus on the Lord, maybe that will fix our marriage or that will fix our finances, or I don't know what they're thinking, to be honest with you, but it doesn't fix anything. And I think that what you have here, honestly, I think it gets amplified as missionaries. If you have a strong marriage, I think that gets amplified. If you're growing in the Lord, that gets amplified. But if you come with a struggling marriage, it's not going to be easier. It's going to get amplified. So, we've had challenges, but I got to tell you, man, like I don't even remember the last time we struggled in our marriage. It's been so long, and it does truly get better but here's the thing, again, I think it's on us. And I just want to reach out to men that are listening to this podcast. It is on us to be the leaders. And part of that is I plan a date night every week. So once a week, I make sure I've lined up the babysitters and I've got something planned, unless there's something that she wants to do, but I have something planned. That's once a week. No, like nothing gets in the way of our date night. That's number one. Number two is once a month we get away for an entire day together. And so I get a babysitter set up. We leave as soon as they all go to school at about 9 o'clock. We then are gone for the entire day. We might go into the city. We might drive to the beach, which is a couple hours away, but we are gone for an entire day. And then once every 3 months, I plan an overnight trip. And that overnight trip could be, just again to the city. It could be, there's a couple of different really cool places, a very touristy town here called Antigua. It could be up to Lake Atitlan, and we'll go spend the night there. Recently, I flew as a Christmas gift, but it was a part of this. My wife and I flew to El Salvador, border country, and did some amazing things, had some amazing food. So, you have to be self-aware, and that means, am I being selfish? Where is my marriage? And let me just tell you, if your marriage is not great, again, right or wrong, I pin it on the man. I'm just telling you. So you can't change the way, quote unquote, your wife is acting, but you can always change the way that you're acting. You can always change your relationship with the Lord. And you can always love your wife regardless. And so I put it all on the man personally. That's just maybe it's because I'm 58 and that's just the generation I grew up in. But I don't think this is a generational thing. I think really this is a Lord thing. This is a biblical thing. So I take responsibility for the health of our marriage. What that means, mostly, Rory, what that means is I'm not going to be blaming my wife for her attitude. I'm not going to blame her for what she's doing or not doing in the house, what she's doing or not doing raising our kids. Like, I'm not going to blame her. If there's something that needs to be fixed, we can talk about it, or I can pick up the slack if I need to. But that's just not who we are, because that's past years ago. But I hope that kind of makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. I love it. There is some generational quality to it. I'm 55, so I mean, you and I both, kind of cut from a similar cloth in a lot of ways. But and so there's a lot of people that are our age that were raised that way that kind of get it. And I think that there's a little bit of a gap in the middle where some things got disconnected. But our boys. Yours, mine, a lot of other boys that are in that age group. There's a very, very strong movement of young men right now that are in their 20s that are identifying with the beliefs and the outlook that we had. back in the day. And so I think it is coming full circle because I think everything does. The
Yeah.
pendulum shifts one way real far, another way real far, and eventually enough strong men settle it in the middle, where it's supposed to be. But for what I'm seeing right now, and especially even with our podcast, we have a huge contingent of younger men that are coming on, that are commenting more, that are forming their own movements. I'm helping a lot of young guys start their own groups, their own podcasts, and there's a lot of that right now where young men are running Christ-centric lives and believing in morals and believing in the Bible and are finding women who feel the same way.
Yeah.
There's not a shortage of it out there anymore. They just don't get talked about a lot because, everything you're seeing on the internet, those folks still want to make sure that looks like the minority. I think it's turning into the majority very quietly, and no one will ever hear about it unless you see it. So keep that hope.
Yeah.
I think we're
No,
okay.
I agree with you. Absolutely. I agree. I'm seeing it also just with like I feel like there is a movement of young men and honestly I think they're just tired. I think that they're tired of the world. They're tired of society and the values that that are being they've been sold. And I do think that if we want to see those young men grow to be strong men of character and value, but also strong men of God, it doesn't just happen. It's not just going to happen. It really starts with you and I as fathers. We really do have to give them a good example because if we're not doing it, they're going to continue to be pulled toward the values of the world.
100%. Leading by example is huge. Absolutely. I think they also need to hear stories like what you're telling, right now. You put this all together in a book, and the name of the book is called "Do You Love Me? Giving Up on the American Dream to Serve the Underprivileged." Now, full disclosure, I've not yet had a chance to read your book. I'm going to, and when I do, I'm going to let you know just to follow up and be accountable because I'm really looking forward to it. But the fact of the matter is you put this together. Is this your journey? Is it a guidebook? Self-help? Tell me about the book itself and the purpose for writing it.
I think the purpose really, what I started out with was that I wanted my great grandkids to know about the things, some of the things that their great grandfather did. I didn't want to be forgotten, so it was kind of a I was really thinking forward, and it was not to sell a bunch of copies or anything like that. It was really just to share with my great grandkids, and then eventually it turned into sharing with other people, the people that we knew and loved and cared about, just sharing with them, the things that the Lord has done over the last 10 years. So that book is a compilation of 50 stories over the last 10 years. And they're short stories, they're easy to read. I think they're encouraging. I think they're challenging. If you want to know what the book is about, the best thing to do is to go to Amazon.com, search Do You Love Me by George Cisneros, and just go to the comments or what do you call it, the reviews. Go to the reviews and just read the reviews because they tell more in a better way about what the book is about than I can probably. And it weirdly turned into a bestseller, which was crazy. We were bestseller on Amazon in 3 different categories, and yeah, it's nothing. Let me just tell anybody that's thinking about writing a book, do it for yourself because you don't make any money. There's, if we sell a book, we make a couple dollars. So it's not about that at all. But it is a really great opportunity to uh, kind of leave something back for the world, for your kids to know that you were actually alive. Because I will tell you, if you think about this, most I don't really know much about my great grandfather. I know about my grandfather, but I might know his name, a few facts here and there, but really within a generation or two, man, we're disconnected pretty quickly. And so I don't know, I just kind of had this dream of someday my great grandkid or great great grandkid like reading this book. Oh my gosh, did you see what I found in the attic? And this is great great grandpa, and he and great great grandma were in, I don't know. Maybe it's kind of a romantic idea of what will happen in the future, but it is proof that we were alive.
There's nothing wrong with writing a book for legacy purposes. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Now I've read a lot of your other accomplishments, things that you've kind of done. I'm assuming that some of these things were done prior to you going to Guatemala. But just so everybody knows, who we're talking to here, and you can pick on any of these if you want. You're laughing already because you know where I'm going. But these are just some of the a little bit of the wild side of the guy that we're talking to right now. So, let's see, married 26 years, father to nine, author. Okay, we got through that stuff, right? Um, Summited Capitol Peak, which apparently is a very large mountain. Okay. Swam with sharks, studied or explored ancient Mayan ruins, and you were actually in the World Series of Poker. Um, that's previous to Guatemala, I assume. And you can jump on any of those if you want and talk about, what led you to any of them. But you had quite the full life before picking up your roots and heading out the door.
Yeah, I feel like I'm an adventurer at heart for sure. So I'm always looking for some sort of adventure. Some of that was prior to Guatemala. Some of it was we actually drove to Belize. It was about a 13-hour drive from Guatemala. Early, when we first got here, we needed to leave the country to get our passport stamped every 6 months. And so one of those times, maybe the second time, we drove to Belize and swam in their coral reefs. And then we took a tour and were able to swim with some sharks out in the middle of the ocean. And yeah, it was that was pretty amazing. I mean, here with my sons, we have summited the third highest peak, which is actually a volcano here in Guatemala. It's a pretty tough climb, but it was something that I was able to do with each of my sons as kind of entering into adulthood when they were 15 years old, and that was exciting. But prior to coming to Guatemala, we were, my wife and I summited Mount Elbert, which is the tallest 14er in Colorado. There are 55, I don't remember, but over 50 14ers, 14,000 feet above sea level in Colorado, and we summited the highest one together. We ran a marathon together before we came to Guatemala. I used to participate in triathlons, and so yeah, I think we love that life. We love here in Guatemala with my sons. I we what do you call it when we rappelled down a waterfall here in, this thinking of that day, just rappelling down a waterfall in Guatemala, which is just, yeah. So I continue to look for I'm 58. And so maybe I can't do everything, but I still try to keep healthy and stay alive, get into the gym as often as I can and eat well and all that stuff because we have young kids, man. We got to make sure that I want to make sure that I'm a good, strong father for them.
They're amazing stories, all of them. I really can't understand why anybody would intentionally jump into water that had sharks in it knowingly. But we're going to pass that up because I just have an irrational fear of sharks to begin with. So, I mean, I'm from the Jaws generation,
I am too.
right?
I am too.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how you did something like that, but we're going to move on. But what this does show everybody, and the reason that I brought it all up is because you've been an adventurer. You've been all about life experiences. You haven't been someone who just, settles into the 9 to 5, sits down, goes home, cracks open a beer and watches Netflix. It's just never been you, from what I can tell here. And so you went here, you did all this in Guatemala. It really doesn't sound like it was that big of a leap to go to Guatemala when you look at some of these other things, just in terms of the gravity of the situation, maybe the longevity of the trip to Guatemala was a little different than maybe what you had planned because you've been there 12 years now.
Mhm.
But now, even after all of that, you're still an adventurer because you've got a brand new Cuban project that you're starting up. Tell us about that because, I mean, of course, you had nothing better to do with your life than go start a whole new thing.
Yeah, so Cuba is an interesting project that we have, and it is a ministry as part of our ministry, but it is not what we originally thought it would be. So my wife and I think Cuba is just such an interesting place. So while we were here in Guatemala, we took a 5-day trip and we went to Cuba just to visit it because we'd seen pictures and it just seemed like a great place and it was now open for Americans to go in. And so we got there and it was really weird, man. Like literally when we landed, we just felt this like darkness over the island. I'm not that kind of guy, but it felt like this spiritual darkness. And even though it was a very interesting place, we flew into Havana. Um, but I think the darkness was combined with a couple of things. Number one, it is an extremely poor country. Number two, it is riddled with witchcraft. And 70% of the country, we found out later, we didn't know going in, but 70% of the country practices a form of religion called Santeria. Santeria is this kind of melding of the Catholic faith, which was there, back in the 1500s, with African faiths that came over with the slaves to Cuba, and they had a lot of idols and satanic worship. One of those religions that is mixed with Catholicism is voodoo. And so you have, these people who really consider themselves Christians, but they aren't Christians in any way. And so we later found out what that heaviness was. The whole entire time that we were there, we would ask people because we're missionaries and we're just curious, like, um, do you go to church? That was the question. Do you go to church? No, they either didn't go to church or they do. And there's another kind of form of faith there called like spirituality, where they believe in like nature and things like that. But not until the day before we left did we meet our first professing Christian. And that was pretty wild. So years later, a couple years later, someone was asking my wife and I, you guys have been to a number of different countries. You've traveled a little bit. Is there somewhere that you wouldn't go, like that you wouldn't want to go back and visit? And like at the same exact time, my wife and I are like, Cuba. We will never go back to Cuba. As a matter of fact, when we left, we got on the plane that day when we left Cuba, and we told each other, we need to pray, and we did. We need to pray for missionaries to come to Guatemala or to come to Cuba because it was just dark, and there are 11 million people on that little island. And so, not to get into the whole story of why we went, but eventually we felt called to Cuba. So I took a 10-day vision trip. I flew to Cuba on my own. I met up with a referral of a pastor, met with him. And as it turns out, I found this kind of tiny group of faithful Christian pastors who were teaching healthy doctrine and solid Christian theology. And so, as it turns out, we as Americans, we can't really live there. I can't even go there as a missionary. It's illegal for me to go there as a pastor or a missionary. But what we've been doing and what this has turned into is we are supporting these pastors financially. We did a ton of research and just really vetting of making sure that they were well aligned with solid Christian faith. And so I traveled to Cuba. I keep mixing the names, but I travel to Cuba 4 times a year, 5 times sometimes. Every time I go in, I'm carrying a bag full of money. And the reason I do that is because I don't think anybody has any idea. Really, I don't think most people have any idea what is going on that little island. But they're severely oppressed. The government runs everything. For example, the minimum wage, I think in the States ranges somewhere between maybe $10 and $15 an hour, $12 an hour. In Cuba, I don't know what it is per hour. In Cuba, the minimum wage when you work for the state, so you can only work for the state. And so if you work for the state, which is the government, so that means they own all the hotels. So if you work for a hotel, they own all the gas stations. If you work for a gas station, all the hospitals, all the schools, everything is run by socialistic government, communistic, really. So if you work for the government, minimum wage and really average wage is like $17 a month. That's what
Wow.
they live on. And
Wow.
so when you have pastors, generally the way pastors work is they are um, pastoring their church, but they also work a job with the state. So what we have done is we've been able to go in, provide them with a solid basic income so that they can focus on that and not have to work for the state. We currently are partnered with 9 pastors and a missionary. They're all Cuban, and then there are 5 or 6 pastors that are interns that are becoming pastors that we also financially support. So it's not like we know the value of the financial support that we've had over the years here in Guatemala. And so for us to be able to do that, to encourage them in their walk with the Lord and encourage them in the work that they're doing, not just prayerfully, but also financially. It is a huge passion of ours, and it's something that we feel really fortunate to be a part of.
My goodness. Um, just wow. Again, the you never know where God is going to call you. And so you and your wife are flying away going, we're praying for missionaries to come here. And God goes, yeah, you should be the first one. Let's lead the way.
Yeah,
Right?
I know a couple. God's like, I know a guy.
Right. I know a guy. So, all right. And so this is an ongoing thing then in Cuba to support these priests to keep the movement going. Now, if they're not working for the government, are they actually in violation of the law down there? And
No, they're not. The government is such a mess right now that that's just one less person they have to deal with.
I
And
see.
so they would be earning maybe 15 or 17. For example, doctors,
Hmm.
they earn $18 a month. Doctors, if you're a teacher, you
Wow.
earn, 15, $16 a month, and you can't survive on that. So a lot of income comes in from other countries, from the United States. They have family members that escaped the island that are living in maybe Miami or other places, and they send money in just like we're bringing money in. The government is happy to allow you to bring money in. You can take up to $5,000 every single time I go in. I take $5,000, and every time I go, I want to take 10, but I can't. So that's the reason that I'm going back so often, is just to continue to support these pastors. We're currently supporting them with the main pastor of the ministry in Cuba is we support him with $200 per month, which is just barely covering the needs of him and his family. Like I said, just because you earn $16 to $18 per month doesn't mean you can survive on that, because you can't. So that's a whole other podcast, is how is it that they do survive, because it really takes $200 to $250 per month to just pay the basic bills and live the most minimal lifestyle that you can. So how are they doing that? How do you make up the other $185 per month? And
Right.
it is like magic. Like it's literally they're sustained by the Lord. But I could, that's a whole other, like I said, another podcast. And
For sure.
yeah, so we feel, like I said, we feel really blessed to be able to be a part of that.
That's crazy, that amount of money. But I mean, I've seen that in a lot of other countries, and I know that that's actually more prevalent than people think. So
Absolutely.
it's great that you're doing something to help, and that you're down there trying to spread the word. So listen, your mission in your life is fascinating and definitely admirable. The way that you've raised your family is incredible, and keeping them together through this whole thing. All sorts of credit to you for everything that you've
Thank
done.
you.
I'm wildly impressed with everything you've been able to accomplish, and you're out there trying to do more. As we kind of pull this together, you've given me a lot of your time today to tell your story, and I'm sure it's going to motivate and inspire a lot of people that are hearing it. And I appreciate that very much. But I also know we haven't even scratch the surface of everything that goes on with you and your family and your mission. So let me just, as we wrap things up, let me kind of throw it to you a little bit. With everything that we've talked about, was there anything that I didn't ask you or that we didn't get to that you want to make sure you get out here today? Was there something that maybe we did talk about and you want to just hammer it home, a little bit more, or maybe you just have a good leave behind, a nugget for the listeners, sort of on our way out? I'm going to give you the floor for a couple of minutes and go for it.
Man, I appreciate that, Rory. It's been amazing to talk to you. So I appreciate your inviting me on. But I think two things that really come to mind, and the number one thing, and they're actually kind of related. The number one thing is I just want to encourage men to put their focus on the Lord. I think that if I were to ask 100 men, 100 Christian men, would you like to hear from the Lord more often than you do? And I think most of them would say, yeah, I really don't hear from the Lord, to be honest with you. And so I want to encourage men to spend time with him. So, for example, if my wife were to call me right now on my cell phone and I picked up the phone she says, hey, babe, this is your wife. And let's say it wasn't her. I'd be like, yeah, this isn't my wife. Who is this? No, no, no. This is Vonda. This is your wife. And I just wanted to give you a quick call and let you know I love you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't her. So it isn't my wife calling, somebody else calling. It's a different number. But so here's the thing. I've been married 26 years. I see her every day. I talk to her all the time. I recognize her voice. I know her voice. Well, it's the same thing with God. If you want to hear from God, you've got to spend time with him. And the best way to spend time with him, in my opinion, is to spend time in the word. So if you want to hear God's voice more clearly, if you want to hear more of God's voice in your life, you have got to spend time with him in the word. Because prayer, it's hard to tell. Like, is that me? Is that my voice? Or is that the Lord speaking to me? Is that the Holy Spirit? So I just want to encourage men out there that if you want more of God in your life, you've got to spend time with him. So here's the thing, man. Reading the Bible can be very hard. I struggled reading the Bible for most of my life. And everything changed when I started studying the Bible. And so what I've done for the last over a year, it's been about a year and a half now. But I started dissecting the Word of God one chapter at a time in a way that I could understand it. And then what I did is I started sharing it with my wife. I'm like, babe, you're not going to believe what did you know this, that, the other? And I was just so excited about it. So I started sharing it with my wife. Well, then January 1st of last year, I started sharing it with everybody. I put it into a newsletter. So once a week, I send a newsletter out where I break down a chapter of the Bible. Listen, this is how deep it goes. It's taken us a year and 4 months to get through the Gospel of Luke and 21 chapters of Acts. Because, for example, chapter 21 of Acts was 3 weeks. It was 3 parts. But I write it in a way that it's a lot of words. It's like a long newsletter, but like it goes like that. People, I don't know if you have a newsletter or not, but we have like a 67% open rate. We have very few people fall off. We've got thousands of people from all over the world that read this, and they're just madly encouraged. People have called it addicting. And so if you're not sure where to start in the Bible, if the Bible has been boring, that's fine, because it was really boring for me. It was hard to read. I was hard to stay awake. I am telling you, I wish here is, I don't have it handy, but like just in the last couple of days, I had a single mom reach out to me and say, hey, just so you know, I finished chapter 21 and you encouraged us to just go ahead and read the rest of Acts. I did read the rest of Acts with my 2 sons, and we are just so encouraged and we can't wait for chapter 22. That just came in like yesterday, the day before. So someone else, said, this is the movie. Your newsletter is the movie that we should have gotten that we never got. That was never written. And so it's just, I don't know, man. It is probably, of everything I do ministry wise, this is what I'm most passionate about. And so I just want to encourage, I'm just going to do it like a plug of just, if you want to read the Bible in a different way, it is completely free. It is covered in his dust.org. If you could put that maybe in the show notes,
Of
but
course.
this, just try it for a couple of weeks. Try it for 2 Saturdays. I send it out on a Saturday. Try it for a couple of weeks. If you don't like it, just unsubscribe. It's no big deal. Uh, we have so few people unsubscribe, and it is just my passion. I love sharing the Bible in a way that people want to go back. Like people can't wait. Within 5 minutes, this is no exaggeration, within 5 minutes, 600 people open that newsletter within 5 minutes of sending it out.
That's great. That is
Yeah. So
fantastic. That really is. I knew that you were going to cover that part during your final few minutes here, and if you didn't, I had it right here. Like, all right, we need to make sure we hit this. But
no, I
I know that
appreciate it, man.
I know it's important to you, and you put a lot of work into it. And it's not just some quick, easy read, newsletter like people just glance over and skim and leave. It's something people really dig into and take a lot of meaning home from. So I love that you're out there doing what you're doing with that.
I appreciate it. It is a passion project. It is comes directly, like literally straight from my heart onto the screen, and it is yeah. I absolutely love it.
And coveredinhisdust.org is where they go find this.
That's
Right
it.
on. Beautiful. And we'll have that in the show notes for sure. Beautiful. Love it. George Cisneros, missionary adventurer, Bible advocate, and host of the newsletter Covered in His Dust, author of Do You Love Me? Giving Up the American Dream to Serve the Underprivileged. George, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing everything that you have with our audience, and just giving of yourself to the world the way that you do. It's amazing what you do, and power to you, and my family and I are praying for you, brother.
Man, I appreciate it. I know that you just ended, but I just had a thought. If it's okay with
That's okay.
you,
That's okay. Go ahead.
I, if anybody who's listening, if they sign up for the newsletter and they just say that, hey, I heard about you on Rory's podcast. The first 10 people that say, hey, I signed up for your newsletter, because they can just email me directly from the newsletter. I heard about you on Rory's podcast. 10 people, I want to send a book out to them, man. I think it'll be encouraging. And yeah, that's something I'd love to do if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put that in the show notes too. Hey, go here, mention this. Absolutely. Let me write that down though, because you just upped the whole game here now. Mention heard about you on Rory's podcast. I love that. That's great, and that's very generous of you to do that as well. So appreciate it on behalf of the audience. We all appreciate that. Thank you for giving even more right there at the end.
I appreciate you, man.
All right. Folks, another very powerful episode of The Power of Man here. And, I hope that you folks will take a lot of this and just sort of digest it. Think about your own lives in this context. Here's somebody who has devoted their lives, the lives of their families, they're all devoting it to serving man, to serving the Lord. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing thing to have happen. And in all of our lives, if we spent a little more time thinking about, God, thinking about, what's actually in the Bible, thinking about what took place before we even set foot on this earth, we're going to realize that there's a lot of things out there that are bigger than we are. And you're going to be able to find a little bit of peace, I think. And I know that a lot of us as men are looking for that. So the reason we do this, the reason we bring people like this on, is because you have value and you are worth it. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.